Hello, my lovely cinephiles. Today is the day that I've been promising. Today we are tier ranking all of the Final Destination deaths that have appeared through Final Destination Bloodlines, now that we have finished the series. Now I know that this video has taken a while to come out. I wasn't really sure how I wanted to do it. I thought about ranking them like from worst to best, in my opinion. I thought about doing a tier ranking. I thought about grouping them by movie and doing it that way. But I found that this way just kind of works the best for me. So I hope that you like it. I hope that you enjoy it because I've had a very long day at work and I thought, what is the best way to come home and unwind than to talk to my lovely cinephiles and discuss some gruesome, horrific horror movie deaths. So let's jump right in. Alright, guys, so this is going to be more of a chatty video, not going to really react to a lot, because if you want to see my reaction, over to my regular channel page, there's a whole playlist with all of my Final Destination movie rankings, 1 through 6, I've done them all. They've done pretty well on the channel. It was the very first series that I've done on this channel. We are currently trying to work through that Conjuring universe, but this is going to be a fun little foray into this. So I have here my tier list, and I've done, the good to bad. So bad, I put is Death in the room with us? Because we all know that Death has a plan. Then we got to step up. We got Death was bored. Death was annoyed. Death was just like, get rid of him. Then we have, did Death have a plan? These are just kind of, the meh. Like, if you're reading a book, it's like a 3-star read. Like, you're like, okay, glad I saw it, but whatever. Then we have Death wasn't playing. Okay, so, like, I wouldn't survive that. I don't want to go through that. But it's, I might be a little less worried about it than some of these other deaths. And then finally we have Death really was that bitch. Because, no, thank you. I don't want to go through that. I don't want to deal with that. Who would want to deal with that? I would rather just, die in the premonition. Yeah. So I went through and used Canva to create all of these little tiles that has, you can't see some of them because my face is blocking it, but some of these tiles that have all of the characters' faces, their names on it, and then I also put their deaths down here just to kind of remind myself, even though I'm sure that I've seen it enough times to know. So we're going to start out with these. I put these in and they did not generate randomly, so it is just in order. So we're going to start with Alex Browning. Now, Alex was our premonition boy. He was the final boy of the first Final Destination, played by Devon Sawa, who we all know and love. I love him in Idle Hands, but he has done so many other things. And he was killed off screen by being hit by a falling brick. It's Alex Browning. And he's being hit by a falling brick. Is Death in the room with us? Because I feel like that is just I know in my reaction I said that it was kind of like Death was just like whatever, which would more be Death was bored, but really it's Alex. This is not some random character who is just there. This is Alex. This is the premonition haver. This is the main character. And he was hit by a falling brick off screen. No. Okay. Is Death in the room with us? Next, we have Todd Wagner. He is the first of the Flight 180 survivors that is killed, and he is strangled in the bathtub. Now, this scene is horrific. It is Death. The first time we see Death actually in physical form, if you will, but when it comes out in the water and everything, we see the shadows, which we don't see in all the movies, and there's just the petechia in his eyes, like, no, I'm gonna actually put this one up and Death wasn't playing, because that is not something I want to do. Like, we all take showers every day, hopefully. And we all know that there are dangers in there. I have cut my foot from toe to heel on a razor that fell in the shower that I didn't notice had fallen. So there's always those dangers. So I'm going to put that in Death Wasn't Playing. Next, we have Terry Chaney, who was hit by a bus. Now, this one I've heard is a lot of people's favorite Final Destination death just because of the fact that it's so sudden. But after you've watched the movie several times, you see it coming. You see the signs of the bus in the window. You see Alex start to kind of, go, wait, what's going on? And then Terry is the only person that walks away from the group. So obviously a death is coming. Terry is singled out. She's walked away from the group. The rest of the survivors are literally standing on the sidewalk off to the side. So unless we're about to have a 20-minute movie and Death is just going to careen a bus off the road and into all of the rest of the survivors, Terry's time is up. So it doesn't really shock me. It didn't shock me at all. So I'm just going to put, did Death really have a plan? Now, this is mostly because of how many signs there were prior to her being hit by the bus. She was singled out. It's just, that's really all I can say, is Terry's time was up. Next, we have Val Lewton. She is notoriously my favorite death of Final Destination because she dies. I do not like her character. I do not like anything about her. You can see in my reaction, I pretty much just fuss at her the entire time. But I'm going to put her death up in Death Really Was That Bitch. Because I don't want to go through that. First of all, I wouldn't go through that just because there were literally ways that she could have avoided that. But no thank you. The fact of the matter is I don't want to die in a house explosion. I don't want to get stabbed when I'm trying to get help. And I don't want my neck slit open. So I'm going to go with Death Really Was That Bitch. Because obviously Death knew that people were going to hate her. And really made her death elaborate. Next we have Billy Hitchcock. He was decapitated by a piece of car when it was ran over by the train. This is probably the death that I would say shocked me the most in Final Destination. Just because, yes, like with Terry, he was kind of off to himself. He was secluded. But you just didn't think it was going to happen so suddenly after Carter getting pulled from the car. So we had his death. We had Carter's death skipped. And then Billy was standing there screaming and being all dramatic and everything. But you didn't think it was going to happen so suddenly. So I'm actually... This is a tough one. I think I'm going to go with Death Wasn't Playing. Death Wasn't Playing because he was mad that Carter got out. And he was like, you know what? No, I'm going to take one of you. I'm going to take one of you. It might not be my best death, but I'm going to take one of you. Yeah. Then we have Carter. This is the last of the Final Destination 1 deaths. But we have Carter Horton, who is notoriously one of the most hated Final Destination characters. I love Kerr Smith, so I always do love Carter. But he was hit by a falling sign. This sucks because Carter had started to have a character redemption arc where he was friends with Alex, he was friends with Clear, and then he's killed. So I like Carter's death, but you don't see it. And I feel like if you saw it, like if you actually saw it would be higher up ranked for me. But when thinking about it compared to some of the other deaths we know, and we know that Final Destination has some of the tamer deaths compared to later Final Destination movies, I'm going to put it in Death Was Bored. Because I feel like Death waited those 6 months or so. He was just kind of like, you know what, I'm gonna relax, I'm gonna chill, and then next thing you know, they're in Paris again, and it's like, how dare you mock me by going back to Paris? One of you has got to go. So I'm gonna say Death Was Bored, because getting hit by a falling sign is crazy and horrific and sad, but you didn't see it coming. Carter didn't see it coming. So it's a little less sad than some of the other deaths. Moving into Final Destination 2, we have a couple of deaths here, starting with Shayna, Frankie, and Dano. These are Kimberly's friends who are in the Ford Explorer, I guess it is, when it gets hit by I want to say the truck was pulling cars, because it wasn't the log truck that hit them. The log truck was already further down, causing an accident, as it does. But I don't like their deaths. It didn't matter to me. The characters didn't matter to me. So I'm just going to put his death in the room with us. Now we have Evan Lewis. Evan Lewis was the big lottery winner in Final Destination 2, which was a very random little thing that they did. I don't understand why. Maybe it's to talk about the fact of him putting his hand down the garbage disposal with the big new watch on it to look for a ring that was gaudy, just absolutely gaudy. But his death, if we're looking at just his death scene, it is one of the more explicit ones in Final Destination 2. I hate eye stuff. I've already discussed that. But he kind of caused it himself. Why are you throwing spaghetti out the window? Why are you causing a huge mess just to then get your apartment blown up, basically? So I'm going to say, did Death have a plan? Now, the reason that I'm saying that is because what was Death's actual plan? If Evan had not made the choice to throw the spaghetti out, if he did not make the choice to get out his little Chinese takeout, like, what was the plan here? What was the plan here? Because it just seems like a lot of random coincidences stacked up to lead to his death. Now we have Tim Carpenter. Tim is, I want to say, a teenager in this film, and he is the son of Nora Carpenter. He's kind of annoying, but he gets hit by a pane of glass. He gets absolutely crushed by a pane of glass. And this is, according to several interviews, Richard Harmon, who plays in the new Final Destination Bloodlines, his favorite death of the series. But it's not my favorite death of the series. Tim's death, I'm going to say death is bored. Death was bored. Why are you chasing after pigeons? If I've gone through this death experience, this big, huge death experience, and the person who claims to be seeing signs of my death and is running at me screaming, pigeons, pigeons, am I going to run towards the pigeons, or am I going to, like, hightail it away from the pigeons? I'm hightailing it away from the pigeons. What does Tim do? Tim hightails it towards the pigeons. Tim asked Death to come see him. Tim greeted Death like an old friend. So you know what? When Tim did that, Death was like, you know what? Just take him out. I can't give this guy a great death if he's just gonna do this. But moving on to his mother, Nora Carpenter. She has probably the most gruesome death, in my opinion. It's not my favorite death of the movie, but the most gruesome death, in my opinion, where she gets decapitated, completely decapitated by the bumpers of an elevator. No, all of us have been on an elevator. All of us have felt that little jolt when it stops. All of us have been kind of scared of, what if it gets stuck? What if this happens? No, thank you. I'm not doing that, and I don't want... That is the least thing I want to do. It was not a clean cut. She was crushed. It came off because her neck got cut. No. Death really was that bitch. Okay, so now we are looking at Kat's death from Final Destination 2, which I'm a little iffy about, because her death is long, and it involves so many different moving parts that obviously it's not that Death was bored. Death had a plan, obviously. But I don't like Kat as a character. And so I didn't care if she died or not. But if we're looking just at her death, the death itself, it's not fun. We all have been in a car crash, whether it was a fender bender or a head-on collision or anything to that sort, that this seems like a real possibility. This seems scary. And if you've ever had to have life-saving services, you always wonder, what's going to happen. Like, am I going to make it out of this? So I'm going to put this in Death Wasn't Playing, just because I feel like all of the moving parts worked well together, and I feel like the sheer fear that's involved in car collisions and those type of situations works well. Now we have Rory, which is my favorite death in Final Destination 2. He is, I want to say, trisected. Correct me down in the comment section if I'm wrong on that. But he basically has a barbed wire fence that flies after Kat's car explodes, or the news van explodes, and wraps around him and just completely, trisects him. My question has always been, who has a barbed wire fence? But I don't live on a farm, and I don't work on a farm, so who knows? But I definitely could see how it would happen. I don't see how both posts would come out the way they did, but I could definitely see how the force of an explosion would throw something towards somebody else and could cause a death. However, this is my favorite death. Just the look of his body coming apart and just falling. But I'm also going to put this one in Death Really Wasn't Playing, because Rory had just told Kimberly that he was going to get his life together, that he wanted to do better, and then he's over there doing his little stuff again when it happens. So I feel like Death was watching that and was like, really? Really? So you're going to lie? You're going to lie? Okay. I got something for you. And then wrapped him. Now, Eugene and Clear. Absolute blasphemy. Absolute blasphemy. How are you going to kill Clear Rivers? Like, what? And it didn't occur to me until later that this is kind of a trope where final girls come back for another movie and wind up getting killed off. It happened in Nightmare on Elm Street 3 with Nancy. It happened in Halloween Resurrection with Laurie, but then, that kind of got retconned. So it's crazy to think if they do that with Sydney in Scream 7, we're going to have problems. Scream is by far my favorite series. But they did that here with Clear. And Clear is the only character, other than Tony Todd, who has come back in the series. But Eugene and Clear are in the hospital. Eugene has suffered a collapsed lung due to the collision that also took the lives of Kat and Rory, eventually. And there is just a lot of random things. Like, why is there not a nurse on his floor? Why did nobody come to check on him? Why was Clear the only one that went in that room? I'm going to say, did Death really have a plan? Did Death have a plan? Because this one just irritated me because it killed Clear. But the way that Eugene died, it was like, what? You're in a hospital. Why is nobody coming to check on him? Like, if somebody had come to check on him other than Clear, would it have been the same? Or would you have taken out them as well? With Clear, I feel like Death was just like, she is annoying me. I've got to get rid of her. Her boyfriend's already gone. Her friend's already gone. Why is she still here? She locked herself up in an institution for God knows how long. How dare she? Like, you're not going to get out of this one. So I feel like that's where Clear's death kind of came into it. Now we are moving in to Final Destination 3, which is, out of the older movies, my favorite movie. And we have Ashley and Ashlyn. And I can already tell you, probably everybody's going to put this stuff in here. This is going to go straight up into Death Was Really That Bitch. I have tanned once in my entire life. I'm white as a ghost. But I thought about this movie as soon as I went into that tanning salon. This has created a lifelong fear in everybody who has watched this movie of tanning salons. The same way the second one did log trucks. You can't convince me otherwise of that one. It's not the roller coaster. I already have a fear of heights. You weren't gonna get me on that one. It's a fear of something as simple as a tanning bed. I do not want to be burned alive. People ask all the time, like, those really would you rather questions. Would you rather burn alive or would you rather die being frozen to death? Freeze me. Freeze me. I do not want to be burned alive. Thank you. No, not feeling it. Not feeling it. I'd rather, go numb. And I say that as somebody who has never had hypothermia, so I don't really know what it's like, but if given the option, I'd rather freeze to death. Moving on to Frankie Cheeks, who is so hated. I hate him so much. This is going to be a little bit of a... We were thinking about his death, not just his character. We were thinking of his death, not just his character. Hot take. I am not a fan of Frankie's death. I think that whole scene is kind of just meh. Just that one scene of them in the drive-thru, it's just meh. Like, the truck coming down and everything, the song, them kicking out the windshield, it's just meh. And then to find out afterwards that it was Frankie, I felt like was a cop-out. Like, Frankie is probably well, there's no probably about it. Frankie is the most hated person in that movie. He was set up to be the antagonist of that movie, even though they try to make it Ian later. It didn't work. Frankie is still the most hated character in that movie, and you gave us basically what would appear to be an off-screen death, because we don't see that it's him until after it's already over. And it was quick and painless for him, and we despised him. Now we have Luis Romero. He had his head crushed by weights in the gym. Is death in the room with us? Lewis is a character that just really doesn't matter. In my opinion, he's kind of just the token jock in that way. He is there, we see him at the roller coaster being kind of a jerk, and then we see him later on also being a jerk and fussing about scholarships and not believing anybody by what they say and accusing Wendy of just being psychotic and everything, and then he dies by weights. And you saw it coming. You didn't care. You kind of just wanted the scene to go. You're just like, just move on with it. Just get on with it. What led up to his death was more intense and more gripping than his actual death. Now, moving on to somebody who got a little more of intense of a death, we're looking at Aaron, who is played by Alexis Johnson, who gets completely nailed in the face. I'm going to put that one in Death Wasn't Playing. So, Aaron's death is my favorite in Final Destination 3. Like, I don't want to have Ashley and Ashlyn's death, and just because it's in Death Was Really That Bitch does not mean it's my favorite death. Erin's death is my favorite death because of everything that leads up to it and just the visual of the nails in her face. However, I would rather have her death than Ashley and Ashlyn's death, if that makes sense. I would rather have the nails going through my face because that is a little bit quicker than burning alive. And again, this tier list is which deaths the death itself, not which one is my favorite. So I'm going to put that one in Death Really Wasn't Playing because everything that leads up to it, the sawdust, the pigeons and everything, it was really a gruesome death. It just didn't get put in Death Really Was That Bitch just because it is not horrific. It is bad. Do not get me wrong. But it is not as horrific as some of the other deaths on this list. Erin's death is a catalyst for how Ian acts with Wendy. It's a catalyst for Ian's death and everything like that. But it could be worse. Now we're going to look at Perry. She is kind of the forgotten character in Final Destination 3. She's on screen for maybe 4 minutes, and one of those minutes she's dying. So I'm going to put hers in as death in the room with us. Not just because she's barely on screen, but because her death, which we talked about with Rory's death of how it could have explosion and thrown like a PVC pipe at him. Her death is pretty much that. The horse knocks a flagpole off, which then gets thrown through the sky and then lands into her. It's a shocking death, it really is. But for somebody who they've tried to figure out who they are this entire movie, and then she gets a flagpole through her torso, it wasn't shocking. You didn't care, and it was brushed over like that. Now we are looking at Ian McKinley. He was flattened by a cherry picker. Bisected. This one is different because I feel like there's a lot of deaths in Final Destination where they get crushed by something or another. And Ian's death, I feel like, was better than Tim's death, so I'm gonna put it in Did Death Have a Plan? The way that it was orchestrated didn't make as much sense. Now, him getting bisected and you seeing that little shot of him flipping the camera off, that is awesome. But he was just crushed. He didn't have some pivotal death. He didn't have some great death. He got crushed. And so it's one of the things where it's crazy and it's bad, but he got crushed. Now we're looking at Wendy, Julie, and Kevin. They got in a train derailment. I'm also going to put that in Did Death Really Have a Plan? Train derailments, if you're looking at that, it's kind of like a half and half situation. Do you want to be in a train derailment? Absolutely not. I've never been on a train in my life, but I would be very appreciative if it didn't derail while I was on it. But it's one of those things where you can either die suddenly and not even know that your train derailed, or you wind up like Wendy does, and you're sitting there about to get hit by another train. So, was the derailment as bad as some of these other deaths, or was death just like, you know what, I'm just going to derail this train, Invisible Man style, and see what happens? Or is it really as bad as it thinks it is? Now, in the premonition, yeah, like, I don't think I'd want Julie's death. I wouldn't want to be, completely taken out by a tire or a piece of the train. I definitely wouldn't want Kevin's death. Don't make me a blended mess up against the wall. But I also don't want Wendy's death. I don't want to be hit by a train head on. Now, moving into the absolute worst Final Destination movie there is, The Final Destination, which was not The Final Destination. A lot of these deaths are probably not going to rank very high. We have Nadia, who got hit by a tire outside. And I'm going to put hers in is Death in the Room with Us. Her death was shocking, but my favorite deaths are the ones where they know it's coming. It's not the shocking ones. It's the ones where you see them try to get away from it. Nadia's death, she didn't see it coming. It was shot from a weird angle. She's just yelling, and all of a sudden it comes and hits her. Now we are looking at the second Carter of the franchise, Carter Daniels. He is a horrible person, but his death was basically road rash until he got lit on fire and then decapitated at some point. His death is very confusing because he's dragged down the road, so he's getting road rash. He then gets lit on fire because the chain sparks off the ground, and then his head flies. So there was just so many different things. And I know that part of this is just, it was a bad script. But for this death, I'm actually going to put in Death Was Bored. Because there were so many different things thrown in that it almost made the death too jumbled, when a lot of the other deaths were very simplistic. Then we are going into Samantha's. She got hit with a rock through the eye. I'm going to put hers in Did Death Have a Plan? It's a rock through the eye. It's very sudden, but none of these characters mattered at all in this film. You didn't come to care about these characters like you did in the other films. You didn't care if they died. You didn't care if they lived. You didn't care. But just going off the death, her death was sudden, yes, but it was just so like, ugh. Now we are getting Andy. I put in here that he was cubed because, I mean, that's basically what happened. And it's the same thing with Carter's death, where there was just so much going on. So I'm putting that one also in Death Was Bored, because you have him upset over his girlfriend's death, and then the air tank comes out and hits him and throws him into the fence and cubes him out. And it was just, there was so much going on that with him being a mechanic, I feel like his death would be higher up on this list if he'd finished talking to them, went in to the body shop, and then starting to see things that they had just talked to him about, and then all of a sudden something happened in the mechanic shop. Now we are going to look at Hunt. Hunt's death, I'm going to put in Death Wasn't Playing. Death was not playing. This is a death that I don't think could have really happened. I've been told by several people it could not have really happened. However, this is a horrific death. I do think that he would have drowned first before his organs had been sucked out. However, it depends on how long he could hold his breath. I mean, if he was a swimmer, it could have been longer. But I don't want my inside sucked out via pool drain. Jonathan Groves, my favorite character of this entire film, and he's only on screen for like 5 minutes. He gets crushed by a bathtub. By a bathtub in a hospital. I think that Jonathan's death was done just to get another death on screen. Just to up the body count, so that way they could throw something else in. His death is sad, but it's not worse than some of the other deaths on here. Now, looking at George was a character I really actually liked in the Final Destination, and his death should have reflected his character in that film. But his death wound up being just a rehashing of Terry's death, and it wasn't as good as Terry's death. Yeah, he was closer to Nick at the time, so we didn't have that moment where we were like, no, wait a minute, this person's being pushed off to the side, are they about to die? But it lacked so much from the other films and from the deaths and even this movie. He gets hit, and then Nick's automatically like, oh no, run away. Like, your friend just died. Your friend just got hit by an ambulance, and you're just like, oh, well, I gotta go. Now we're looking at Janet and Lori and Nick's death. They were all in some way crushed or ran over by an 18-wheeler at the end of the film. So we are looking now at Nick, Lori, and Janet's death. This is the last of the Final Destination. Thank you. I'm going to throw this in, did death have a plan? Now, my reasoning with this is they get crushed by an 18-wheeler. This is a horrific death. Nobody wants to be ran over by an 18-wheeler. Nobody wants to be crushed. But it is not as horrific as some of the other deaths in here. Some of these deaths are just absolutely torturous, whereas some of them kind of come off as it would be instantaneous and it would be something that could just be done and be over with. So that's why I'm going to throw that one in. Did death have a plan? Because I don't want to be ran over by an 18-wheeler. But I would much rather be run over by an 18-wheeler than have nails through my face. Now, moving into Final Destination 5, I actually really like Final Destination 5, as we've seen in my reactions, or if you've seen the movie, it winds up being a prequel. So, first we're going to start with Candace Hooper. No. This entire scene is anxiety-ridden and makes you never want to go into a gym again. And I don't mean like a weight gym. I mean a gym. Now, do I think that there's issues with this death? Yes. As soon as the thing flies into her face, why is she trying to dismount? Why not just let go and fall on you behind? But you're in the what is it, centrifugal force and everything. Maybe her brain wasn't working correctly and she was like, oh, no, I gotta dismount. So I'm not gonna fully harp on her for that. But this whole thing, you know, and then the spine breaking and the bone crunching and the leg being in two different places and everything. No. Yes, it is pretty much instantaneous, but just that visual, I don't want that. Isaac gets his head crushed by a Buddha statue. I'm putting that in Death Was Bored. His scene leading up to his death is great. I think that it's awesome with the lady who he thinks can't speak English, the acupuncture and everything like that, I think is a great scene. But his head gets crushed, and it's almost as if it's a letdown from the rest of the scene. Like, you expect more because of the issues with the acupuncture, because of the sterilization fluid getting... I say that because I don't know exactly what it is, and I don't want to go and say the wrong thing, and then somebody tell me, no, you should have done this. The fluid getting the isopropyl alcohol or the rubbing alcohol getting lit up and everything. You expect a bigger death, but he just falls, and then he's laying there, and he's like, oh, I'm good. And then his head gets crushed. So it's kind of a letdown in the end, but him as a character, I was just like, oh, you're dead. Okay, Olivia Castle. Is this going to be the first time that we have two from the same movie get put into Death Really Was That Bitch? Yes. I don't have issues with my eyes. I have 20/20 vision, but I do not do lasers. I don't do it. I cannot stand the thought of a laser coming near me for any kind of surgery. I've had laparoscopic surgery for my gallbladder because it disintegrated and nearly killed me. But I don't ever want to think about, and I don't do eye stuff. I do not. Any kind of eye stuff, I don't do it. That scene in Hostel where she just, nope, I'm good. So anything with eyes is going to really get me, but it's the fact that Olivia has this entire scene where she's trying to stop the laser. She can't stop the laser. The little things in her eye, keeping it open. She's got the headpiece on and everything like that. I don't like that at all. And then she turns around and falls out the window. And then her eye gets ran over. So yeah, we are getting two deaths from the same movie in Death Was Really That Bitch. Now remember, this is my opinion. You are allowed to have your own opinion. No opinion is wrong. This is just where I rank the deaths. I would love to hear your ranking. Roy had his head impaled by a hook. Death wasn't playing. Now, this is one of the less graphic deaths that I'm going to put into this one, just because I like the reveal. I really like how you're thinking that it's going to be Nathan, and then Rory falls, and you hate Rory for how he's been treating Nathan throughout the movie. But when he falls and you see the hook, you're like, oh my god, is everything okay? And it's done off screen, and you just see the aftermath. But seeing his feet hanging, and then you see the blood, and then it pans up to show that hook, that is what really gets me in this film, in this scene. So I actually really enjoyed this death because it is more shocking, and because it is a little bit more of a reveal than some of the others are. Now getting into my absolute favorite in the film is Dennis's death, where a wrench is thrown into, I guess, a motor or a gear. I don't know mechanical stuff, and gets thrown into his face. I'm also going to put this one in Death Wasn't Playing. And this kind of goes hand in hand with what I said about Rory's death. The reveal of just it in his eye sockets. is crazy. It's absolutely horrible. You don't want to see it. You don't expect it, but yet it's there. And it's so sudden. Now we're looking at Peter. Peter got skewered by his best friend. Is Death in the room with us? Peter deserved it. Obviously Peter was going through a lot mentally at the time, so we can't really blame him there, but what we can blame him for is all of his other actions. It was... You saw it coming. You knew that Sam wasn't gonna... Sam was the final boy. You knew he wasn't gonna die. And so Peter's time was very limited, and his whole excuse was just not good. But looking strictly at his death, where he's skewered by that rotisserie thing, it just it I expected more considering what he was putting the characters through. I expected his face to be deep fried or something, and it just wasn't. It wasn't. Nathan gets killed when we find out that it is a prequel. He gets crushed by a piece of airplane debris, and it's also, I'm going to put it in his Death in the Room with Us. I love the fact that that movie's a prequel. I love the reveal that it's a prequel. I even love the reveal that Nathan didn't get as many days as he thought he had. However, once we see that piece of plane debris flying through the sky, you kind of see it coming. And once it actually hits him, it's not shocking. Agent Block, I'm going to put in Death Was Bored. My reasoning for this is it is shocking that Peter would kill an FBI agent. It's not so shocking he would kill his friends. But I feel like because we had them on screen and because in all of these movies we have law enforcement who aren't very helpful, in some way the writers felt like they had to do this. And so his death was more shocking than anything, but he was just shot and you didn't know how many years he had. And it makes you wonder later, was he supposed to be on the plane? So it was just bored. It was there. He had a death, but it wasn't that great. Sam and Molly, I'm going to put up in Death Wasn't Playing. That reveal that they were in Flight 180, the reveal that it was a prequel is the best part of that movie. It's absolute best part of that movie. And seeing that they die in what's now going to become somebody else's premonition is crazy to me. Now, granted, their deaths in general mirror Alex's premonition's death, but like I said with George and Terry's death, if you're going to do something, do it a little bit better. And I felt like Molly and Sam's version of the Flight 180 death was a little bit better than Alex's Flight 180 premonition death. Now we are getting into the newest Final Destination film, Final Destination Bloodlines. This is the last film so far that we know of. And we are looking at Iris Campbell's death. Iris is the matriarch of the Campbell family. She is our original premonition holder back in the 60s. And she gets impaled by a weather vane outside of her house. I really liked Iris's death. I liked how Death was there waiting for her pretty much the entire time. Like, as soon as Death was pretty much egging her to come outside that house. And as soon as she did, it was like, game on. So Death waited for her all these years just to turn around and be like, gotcha. Howard. I love Howard. I love the entire family in Final Destination Bloodlines. But Howard was so kind. He was so sweet. I kind of want to put it in one of these lower two categories just because I'm mad at Death for that. But we're not doing that. We are looking at the death itself. And in that case, I'm going to put it in Death Wasn't Playing. To get your foot completely just cut open by a shard of glass sucks. I've had a horseshoe pole in my leg before. But that isn't as bad as getting the lawnmower to the face, which reminds me so much of that sinister death that shocked everybody, but that death would be a little bit higher on this list. Um, but I just feel like Death wasn't playing with this one. It is shocking, and all of the deaths in this film are very good. They're very shocking. But this one I didn't like as much as I liked Iris's death, and I just thought that it lacked a little something. Julia's death, she got crushed by a garbage truck, well, the compactor part, but her lead up is very devised. So I'm actually going to put hers in Did Death Have a Plan? Because Stephanie kind of called each thing that was happening when Eric and her and Charlie were walking around, and she was like, oh, this could hit this, and then this could hit you, and then you could fall into this, and then that exact same thing happens to Julia. So it made Julia's death less effective for me, because it was kind of like, oh, okay, well, it's going to happen exactly like it is. Okay, well, and yes, when she's in the trash truck and her face starts getting torn apart when she's reaching for Stephanie, that part is scary, but the whole death scene itself was let down by that lead up to it. So it just wasn't as effective as it could have been. Eric. This is no question for me. For you, it might be different, and that's perfectly fine. For me, absolutely no question. Eric goes straight into Death was really that bitch. He got completely torn in half by an MRI machine. I had just had to be in the hospital and do some. I think I had a CAT scan. I'm not sure. It was the first time I'd ever had it, so I'm not sure if it was CAT scan or MRI. But I think it was a CAT scan. Just seeing that, like, this is something that people have to go through every single day, and to see him get folded in half, and then the wheelchair, and just, I don't have the piercings that he has, obviously, but just the thought of piercings being torn out, because I've had my piercing torn out before, um and that's part of why I don't wear them anymore, but that is just horrific. It hurts. It's painful, and to have it like fully ripped, and then get flown at the MRI machine, and then you've got the wheelchair in the back, and they show it slicing through his abdomen. It's no. Bobby, he's such a cinnamon roll. Like, he is that version of looks like a cinnamon roll is a cinnamon roll. Bobby's death, anaphylactic shock. I am not allergic to most things, food-wise, but I'm not allergic to anything food-wise, but I do have allergies, and so I know what it's like to have an allergy, but I do not know what it's like to go into anaphylactic shock, but it doesn't look fun. So the anaphylactic shock part of it pretty much cleared up as soon as he hit himself with the EpiPen, and then the spring from the vending machine came out and hit him. I'm actually going to put his death in Did Death Have a Plan? Now, my reasoning for this is because his death, after seeing how shocking Eric's wasn't that shocking anymore. You kind of expected something to happen because the magnet was still on. You expected something to happen because the vending machine spring had popped out, and you didn't see it come towards the MRI machine. And you knew that once he saw that Eric still had that EpiPen, that he was going to get out of the anaphylactic shock. So you didn't expect him to survive that, but you were a little bit less surprised with his death than you were Eric's death. So that's my reasoning on that one. Darlene. I hesitate with this one between Is Death in the Room with Us or Death Was Bored. I think I'm going to go with Is Death Bored. Well, Death Was Bored. Because I didn't like Darlene's death. Darlene winds up getting hit by, I want to say, a light pole, a telephone pole, and crushed. But the fact that she was able to save Charlie before that happened is what brings her out of Is Death in the Room with Us into Death Was Bored. Charlie getting trapped into that, I did not know how that was going to work, but Darlene being able to get up charred as heck to pull him out of there so that he could go and then save Stephanie, which then led to her death, getting crushed by that light pole, really atoned to a mother's love. But her getting crushed by the light pole being the kid's last hope, or the last line of defense, basically, was just kind of meh. It was, like, we had all these crazy deaths in this movie, and then all of a sudden we just get a light pole. So, that's what took that down for me. I should have put Stephanie and Charlie together, for this one, because they do die together the same way that I did Clear and Eugene, but I didn't for some reason. So, actually, I'm going to move them together, and I'm going to put them in Did Death Have a Plan? Both of them. And this is because, like I've said with others, if you're going to do something, do it better. And we've already seen the log trucks and everything like that, and I don't feel like it was done as well as Final Destination 2. However, I do think that them running away from the train derailment was a little bit better, but it was just such a big scene that you kind of just got bored, or I kind of just got bored with it after a while. I was like, okay, well, they didn't hit the train. Okay, what's next? Then you had the logs coming out, and it was like, okay, so we're gonna get some logs, and they get crushed by the logs. So there was that. I didn't think that they were going to survive after their mother's death, because I kind of called that he didn't let Stephanie be out long enough. So I kind of expected them to die. So their death really wasn't surprising. It just was, it was meh. It was just, oh, they died. And then you're like, oh, well, it's sad they died, but they died. But that's my ranking. So guys, that was my Final Destination tier ranking based on the deaths that we saw in Final Destination through Final Destination Bloodlines. Again, this is just my opinion. You are entitled to your own opinion, and I would love to hear your opinion. If you have any comments about any of the deaths in these movies, or you would have put something in a different category, please go ahead and let me know down in the comments. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I hope to do more of these, probably a little bit closer to when I've seen the movies. That way I can formulate a couple of better opinions about them. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button to see more tier rankings, movie reviews, and movie reactions coming from me. Also, go ahead and hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and go ahead and leave me a comment down below. If you do not want to leave me a comment about the deaths, go ahead and just leave me a truck emoji, because we all know that Final Destination 2 wrecked our childhoods. And I'll see you guys next time, Cinephiles. Bye.